Hi, my name is Ben, and I'm the co-founder of Ascend Finance, where we take complex subjects such as the pros and cons of bankruptcy and simplify them into simple, understandable language. If you've experienced a hardship, you may be considering declaring bankruptcy. It's important to understand the pros and cons of bankruptcy because there definitely are a lot of pros and a lot of cons. And so the purpose of this video is really to get granular and show you a lot of the different pros and cons to expect before filing bankruptcy. If you have any questions on whether or not you should file or even if you qualify for bankruptcy, we also built a free pros and cons bankruptcy calculator at the top of the description that I put a link to that should really help you compare your options of bankruptcy and other options. It should show you the pros and cons. It should show you kind of what to expect and the all-in costs. And the data is based on the bankruptcy forms and also personalized to your finances and the city in which you live. So hopefully that resource is really helpful. We built it specifically for you to be able to kind of weigh the pros and cons. Here's what we're going to cover in this video today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about Chapter 7 versus Chapter 13 bankruptcy, give a quick introduction to kind of help you understand the differences. Next, we're going to talk about the Chapter 7 pros. Then we're going to talk about the Chapter 7 cons, followed by the Chapter 13 bankruptcy pros, the Chapter 13 bankruptcy cons. And then we're going to kind of get into a little bit of a conversation about what you should do specific for your situation. Also, this video is quite long and I apologize in advance, as the last thing I'd want to do is watch a video of myself speak for 10 minutes straight or probably more. As such, we put the video into chapters in place so that you can bounce around to whatever is kind of most helpful for you. Like if you're already thinking that you're doing Chapter 7, then maybe you can just focus on the Chapter 7 portion. Also, if you are interested in hearing more unbiased data and information about getting out of debt cheaper, easier, and faster through bankruptcy or any debt relief medium, please feel free to subscribe because we constantly are putting out new videos that are trying to really help you kind of understand different attributes of these different options that are going to be really helpful for you. Let's go ahead and cover Chapter 13 versus Chapter 7 bankruptcy. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy is quite fast, and you can usually receive a discharge in as little as 90 to 120 days from when you file. That's a pro a lot of people like. Chapter 7 bankruptcy is also often the least expensive debt relief option, so it can be really quick and you can get your discharge and forgiveness from your debt rather quickly. It's often a single attorney payment and a filing fee, so it's a single payment plan, and and generally the attorneys will take payments for that one-time fee. Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you may lose assets, but not necessarily because of what's called bankruptcy exemptions. And I'll put a link in the description below to kind of explain the bankruptcy exemption and how they work and specific for your state. Now, you have to often qualify for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And another thing is that it will be on your credit report for 10 years. Likewise, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is slower. It often takes 3 or 5 years. It's often more expensive. A Chapter 13 bankruptcy can be 3 times the expense of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It's a monthly payment plan, so you make a monthly payment to the trustee and that would be distributed to whoever is owed the money. You often are able to keep assets in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy even if they're over the exemption. And there's not really a qualification of sorts as long as you're under the Chapter 13 debt limits. And I can include a link in the description of what that is. And finally, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is on your credit report for 7 years. So that gives you a little sense of the differences between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Let's go ahead and get into the pros and cons of Chapter 7 bankruptcy. First, it is less expensive than a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. The fees can actually be potentially 1/3 of what a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is. And so you could think about maybe a $1,500 Chapter 7 versus a $4,500 Chapter 13. The fees are actually dependent on where you live, and our bankruptcy pros and cons bankruptcy calculator is actually calculates based on estimate from where you live. So that can give you a really good understanding. Second, the speed of the Chapter 7 discharge is very fast. Where most debt relief options can take multiple years, a Chapter 7 can be done within 90 to 120 days if it's a pretty straightforward case. That means that you can get the debt relief really quickly and not have all the creditors or your collectors going after you. Third, you may be able to actually keep your property in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy as long as they're above the equity or the amount that you own in that asset is not above the exemptions. You can actually often keep a house or a car in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Fourth, it actually can stop debt collection lawsuits. Often people decide on some sort of debt relief when they face a lawsuit, and a Chapter 7 bankruptcy can stop that debt collection lawsuit, and it may not resume as long as you get to the discharge, and it can help get rid of judgments or debts that are dischargeable. Next, you have an automatic stay that's put on your account that basically on you that basically prevents collectors or other things from contacting you. So you get a little peace of mind from going through the bankruptcy process by not getting hounded by collection calls. Finally, it can prevent and get rid of deficiencies. So a deficiency is the amount of money owed to the creditor after like a foreclosure or repossession. And in other words, you may owe more money on a vehicle, it gets repossessed, they auction it off. Now there's a deficiency, they try to sue for that deficiency. So a Chapter 7 bankruptcy can help you get rid of those deficiencies and kind of really help you get that fresh start that you're looking for. Next, we're going to cover the Chapter 7 bankruptcy cons, because it's really important to kind of weigh both sides before to make the most informed decision. First, one of the biggest cons may be that you can still lose property. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy is known as a liquidation property, and any property that is not protected by bankruptcy exemptions is at risk at being sold by the Chapter 7 trustee. The Chapter 7 trustee uses the money from the sale of the debtor's property to pay some of the unsecured creditors back. Now, I put a link below in the description about bankruptcy exemptions, but it's really important to understand those because that is a definite con. Second, your credit score and credit report could be negatively affected by a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy remains on the credit report for 10 years, and it can also reduce your credit score. So that means that it may be hard at the beginning to get access to credit and the bankruptcy remains on your report. But as time goes on, that could be less and less of a hassle. And we also built a bankruptcy rebuilding portal that I can put a link to the description that kind of really helps you rebuild your credit after bankruptcy. Third, there are some debts that aren't dischargeable in a Chapter 7. Some debts that are not dischargeable in Chapter 7 include most taxes, student loans, alimony, child support, restitution, some judgments, and most government debt is not dischargeable. So if you file in Chapter 7, you may continue to owe those debts even when you complete the bankruptcy case. Now, a lot of the unsecured debts, such as credit cards and medical bills, may be discharged in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Fourth, in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, it can be more difficult to prevent a foreclosure or repossession. Because there's not a bankruptcy repayment plan like in a Chapter 13, you must catch up on the mortgage payments and car loan payments quickly in order to keep your house and your car in a Chapter 7 if you are behind. Under a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, you can spread out those payments over 3 or 5 years to keep your home and car in most situations, but you don't really have that luxury in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Fifth, there are some income requirements to qualify for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Now, our pros and cons calculator below will actually estimate whether you actually even qualify for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So that'll help you kind of decide whether that's the option is right for you. But Chapter 7 bankruptcy has specific income requirements to qualify you for bankruptcy discharge under that chapter of bankruptcy. It's called the bankruptcy means test, and it compares your income to the average income of households in your state. If your income exceeds the median income for your state, you may not qualify for a Chapter 7 discharge. However, the means test may not apply if the majority of your debt is business, and you still may qualify even if you're above the median. If you don't have any disposable income, we also built a Chapter 7 above median kind of calculator to help you estimate that you can kind of, I believe, see from the pros and cons calculator. Next, it's really important to understand Chapter 7 policies that are specific to each state. Each state has its own rules and policies regarding Chapter 7 bankruptcy. For example, one state may allow you to keep, $250,000 of home equity, while another state only allows you to keep $25,000 or $30,000. And it's really safe to say that these policies can vary widely from state to state, and these are called exemptions. So make sure you have a really full understanding of the different exemptions in your state, or work with your legal attorney that definitely understands that. I'm going to put a link below in the bankruptcy about bankruptcy exemptions in the description below. And I hope that's a really good resource for you because it links to our state articles that can kind of give you insights for your state. So at this point, you may be wondering, should you file Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Deciding whether to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy is a really complicated matter, and you really have to analyze your income, expenses, debts, and really weigh those situations appropriately. Depending on your situation, you have a lot to consider, and the ultimate option is your option. So we built the free pros and cons calculator to help you kind of estimate that. But if you have any questions or anything, we'd love to chat. Put a comment below. I'd love to try to kind of help facilitate some discussion between you and me. We aren't attorneys, so we can't give you any legal advice, but we do have a lot of attorneys across the United States that we work with that can definitely offer a free phone consultation as well if you're kind of still in the middle of deciding whether what to do. So it's also important to think about other options. So let's next cover Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Chapter 13 bankruptcy is, like we said, a little bit different. It's more expensive. It's a payment plan. You can usually keep your assets in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy while paying them off in a payment plan. So let's go ahead and cover the Chapter 13 pros and cons. First, we'll cover the Chapter 13 pros. First, you could save your home from foreclosure in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. In Chapter 13 bankruptcy, you can catch up on past due mortgage payments over several years. To stop foreclosure without Chapter 13, you would need to catch up with those payments rather quickly in a Chapter 7, qualify for a loan modification or refinance your home mortgage. When you're struggling with the debts already, that might just not be possible. With the help of the bankruptcy courts, you can often keep your home in a Chapter 13 plan by filing a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. The Chapter 13 bankruptcy allows you to reorganize your debt so that you can afford to resume regular monthly payments on your mortgage. Definitely a big pro for people who are struggling to make those mortgage payments, especially in this COVID and having behind on your payments potentially. Second, you could potentially get rid of a second mortgage. Now, if your home is worth less than you own your first mortgage, you may be able to file a motion to value the second mortgage at zero. If the court approves your motion, the entire of your balance of your second mortgage may become put into the unsecured debt portion. So when you complete your Chapter 13 case, the second mortgage is actually wiped clean. However, your home may not be able to be even worth $1 more than what you owe on your first mortgage to make this work. So there's some complicated, and your bankruptcy attorney can help you with that. Third, there's potential for you to actually get rid of tax debts in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So income tax debts are typically not dischargeable in a bankruptcy case. However, some of those payments can be spread out into 3 or 5 years. And in some cases, if your income tax is an older debt and you meet various requirements, you may actually be able to get rid of that tax debt for less than you owe the government. It's very rare, but there is some things that to consider, and your bankruptcy attorney can definitely help you with that. Fourth, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy can also help with car payments. Like your home, if you're behind on your car payments, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy can help you avoid the repossession. Through your Chapter 13 plan, you may be able to lower your car payments if you owe more on your car than it's worth, and you have owned your car for at least 910 days before filing for bankruptcy release. If not, you may be able to stretch the payments on the car loan for another 60 months, which may free up a lower payment and give you a lot of debt relief that you really need and deserve. Fifth, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy could help with domestic support payments. Domestic support obligations, such as alimony or child support in arrears, are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. However, you can include back child support payments and past due alimony payments in your Chapter 13 plan. Instead of facing jail time or other court sanctions, you can catch up on those payments, your past due payments. And this can be a really good benefit to those that are kind of struggling to make those payments and make them meet. You may have to make all your future and child support payments on time to remain in the Chapter 13. So that's important to know, but it could be a good option for those who are kind of struggling with making those payments on time. And sixth, like a Chapter 7, you may be able to get rid of all your unsecured debts in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. General unsecured debts such as credit card debt, unsecured medical bills, old utility bills, old rent payments, and personal loans can total tens of thousands of dollars. And depending on your financial situation, you may be able to get rid of those debts in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy by just making a small percentage of those payments through the Chapter 13 bankruptcy plan. Now, our pros and cons calculator will help you actually estimate your Chapter 13 bankruptcy payment plan. And so it'll kind of give you a sense of what you're paying currently to what you would be paying in a Chapter 13 payment plan. Finally, Chapter 13 bankruptcy can actually stop eviction. One of the less common benefits of Chapter 13 bankruptcy is that it can stop eviction. The answer is a bit more nuanced than that, but the gist of it is that it may be able to stop your eviction, and a Chapter 13 bankruptcy attorney can definitely help in that sense. While the Chapter 13 benefits sound great, let's go through the cons just to help you kind of understand those. First, just like the Chapter 7 bankruptcy, there are negative impacts on your credit score and a credit report. So in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, your credit score is impacted for 10 years, and in Chapter 13 bankruptcy, it's 7 years. So you just need to understand that there is still that credit mark, and your credit score could go down, but it's just important to note that it probably is going to be affected in some way or another, and just to be aware of that. Second, there are more substantial attorney fees in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy than a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The attorney fees are higher, for example, in a Chapter 13 case, as there's a lot more work from the Chapter 13 trustee and a lot more work from the Chapter 13 bankruptcy attorney. And a Chapter 13 bankruptcy attorney could charge between $2,500 and $6,000 in fees, but that is usually included in the plan to make it more affordable. Also, you have to realize there's a Chapter 13 trustee fee that could also equate to thousands of dollars. And our pros and cons calculator helps you estimate that, but it is really important to note that because that's a bigger cost than a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Third, there's also some lower payment flexibility. So a Chapter 13 bankruptcy may have lower payment flexibility, meaning that if you miss a certain number of payments, your case may be dismissed. And dismissed is not the goal of bankruptcy. Discharge is. So there is that less of payment flexibility. And I would say it's probably less payment flexibility than debt settlement, which is an option that kind of, if you have some months that you may not pay, it may be okay. So just something to note that it is a con that you may not have that disposable income. Also, you may be required to pay all of your disposable income in the Chapter 13 plan, which may make it somewhat difficult in some sense to make it ends meet each month. Fourth, the length of the Chapter 13 bankruptcy case is quite long. In Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you can just discharge from your debt within 190 to 120 days, but a Chapter 13 bankruptcy can last 3 or 5 years. So there really is a much longer time period for a Chapter 13 bankruptcy over a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Now, there are some exceptions to this, but many plans are that long. This is often why debt settlement and Chapter 13 bankruptcy are compared closely, because there is that length of time difference. Our pros and cons calculator actually also helps you compare it to debt settlement. So it gives you a really holistic estimate of the differences in the cost. So should you file Chapter 13 bankruptcy? That answer is ultimately your decision, and you know your financial situation much better than us. Our pros and cons calculator can definitely help you kind of weigh those options, and we can link you up with a free bankruptcy attorney consultation in your area if that's helpful to you. But most often, Chapter 13 and Chapter 7 bankruptcy have various pros and cons, and I hope that this video does a good job sharing those things and helping you kind of piece through what might be better for you. Hopefully this Chapter 7 versus Chapter 13 bankruptcy video has been really helpful to kind of help you measure the pros and cons of Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 bankruptcy. If you like the video, we definitely like a like. If you want to see other videos like this, please subscribe, as we make a lot of videos like this. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to watch this very long video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And leave a comment if you have any questions or anything, as we'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. Thanks so much, and see you soon.